Hi, I'm Megan Meese. I am with the Samuel Proctor Oral History program at the University of Florida, and I'm here with this lovely narrator. Could you please introduce yourself and spell out your name for us?
My name is Arlene Salman, Arlene. Salman is Salman, and I'm a senior citizen living in New York.
Well, thank you so much.
I happen to be related to our interviewer with great joy because she is a very, very special part of my life. She is my granddaughter.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you agreed to do this. I'm really looking forward to this interview. So I guess let's get
I look forward
started.
to every single second I get to spend with you, so this is wonderful.
I know. So could you please tell us a bit about yourself and tell me about yourself and any introductory information?
I'm an old lady now, so there's a lot of background.
Go for it.
Okay. So I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, where my father was stationed at Fort Knox. He was in the Army. So I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, but we then moved back to where my parents grew up, and that is the Bronx, New York. And we lived with my grandparents for a while on Grant Avenue in the Bronx. And then we moved into our own place, if you will, in the Quonset huts that were built specifically for the returnee servicemen. So we had, it was very interesting kind of a building. It looked like a, from afar, it looked like a tunnel with a front end and a back end. And the front end was occupied by one family and the back end was occupied by another family. And all around the whole thing was grass and bushes and flowers and stuff that we put in. So that's where I started my schooling. After we moved from Grandma and Grandpa's apartment on Grant Avenue, we moved to the, quote, Quonset huts for the servicemen. And then I went to public school in the Bronx, and I went to junior high school in the Bronx. And then I went to James Monroe High School in the Bronx. And then I went to Hunter College in both the Bronx and Manhattan. And then Hunter College became Lehman College. So I took my master's degree partially at Hunter College. And then when it changed, I was finished at Lehman College. And so that's my education background and my growing up background.
Very nice.
When I was 16 years old, I was at freshman orientation because I got through school pretty quickly because I was in the special progress class in junior high school. So I did the 3 years and 2 years, and then I did the high school also quickly. So I started college at 16. And on my first day of freshman orientation, I went with my friend for freshman orientation and met a man, a boy, who I thought was her boyfriend. But it wasn't. It was her boyfriend's friend. And that's the man I'm now married to. And that's a whole other story that we can go into another time, how I wouldn't let her give him my phone number because I thought it was terrible that he was asking his girlfriend for my phone number. And then I found out, of course, he wasn't her boyfriend. So yeah, give it to him. And that's how you came to be, because you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that whole background.
Very true.
So,
can you tell me a little bit more about your time at Hunter College, what your degrees were in, what kind of classes you took, and how that prepared you for your career?
well, I've had a varied background, varied career. I did go to Hunter College, undergraduate, and then I went to, when Hunter became Lehman, I went to Hunter/Lehman for my graduate degrees. And I taught school in the Bronx for a while. And then I was very involved as a volunteer for the American Cancer Society. And I took some time off from teaching. And next thing I knew, the Cancer Society told me I could not go back to teaching. They won't allow it. I said, what? They said, no, we need you to head up the Westchester division of the American Cancer Society. And so that was how the next phase of my career came to be. I became the director of the Hudson Valley office of the American Cancer Society. Then I took some time off to raise family. And next thing I knew, the Arthritis Foundation said to me, we'd like you to head up the Arthritis Foundation for the area. And so that's what I did until I retired. So that's my work history. I've done a lot of volunteer work, but that's the last of my paid history. And I've done a lot of volunteer work for the Cancer Society, for the Arthritis Foundation, for Jewish causes. I'm still very involved in Jewish causes, including my synagogue here in New Rochelle and the sisterhood. And I'm involved with the book club and the Canasta group and the Mahjong group. And as you can tell, I'm not one who just likes to sit around and do nothing. I have to be busy and I have to be feeling that I'm engaged in productive activities. And so that's who I am. And I'm still married to the love of my life. We got married right after I graduated from college. I graduated from college in June of 63. And I got married in July of 63. I wasn't yet 19 years old.
Wow. Segueing into that a little bit, I know that you mentioned a little bit about your husband's career when we were talking earlier. Could you share a little bit more about that, and then any stories or roles that you had alongside or with that as well?
So my husband also graduated from Hunter College, and then he went on to St. John's University School of Law. He took 6 months off during that period of time to serve in the Army, in the reserves, and then came back and finished his law degree at St. John's. And then he worked for a local assemblyman's law practice. And next thing you know, the man who said he would never, ever be involved in politics because it's a terrible life, and he would never do that to his family because he saw what other families went through whose family members were politicians and they had to be called out at all different hours and they went to different meetings and what have you. He would never do that. Well, guess what? He became a New York City councilman and attended all kinds of meetings day and night. And everybody was calling him and wanting his advice. And it was a very interesting lifestyle, I must admit, because we did get to see and meet with and be with and learn from a lot of very important people in the metropolitan area and even further from that. So it was a very interesting life. And then and your mother once went with Grandpa to a meeting, and she was sitting in the auditorium while he was up on the stage, whatever. And she said something, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but she said something about Grandpa was yelling at this pregnant lady. And it wasn't that he was yelling, he was just talking loud because it was an auditorium. And I remember thinking, wow, she's really protecting womanhood, even at that early age. So that was kind of cool. And I don't know what questions would you like to ask, and I'll try to answer them.
Um, well, I know you had shared a story with me earlier that you said you wanted to tell about a speech that you had to give in Spanish at one
Oh,
point.
goodness. Yeah, well, Grandpa became a New York City councilman, and his district was in the Bronx, and it covered a very mixed area. It had everything you could imagine. It was, I called it little United Nations of the Bronx, because we had every kind of religion, every kind of nationality. And this one particular time, we were invited to attend a Spanish Tenants Association meeting. And most of the people really, English was a second language, but not an easy language for them, because most of them had Spanish as their first language. Well, Grandpa was supposed to speak, and guess what? He couldn't, because he had laryngitis. So the president of this association came over to me and said, "Would you be willing to speak on behalf of your husband?" And I said, "Oh, okay." And I started biting my nails, of course, because I was used to having him take center stage, not me. But I got up there, and I got up onto the stage, and I addressed the audience in Spanish,
Wow.
which not only shocked them, it shocked me too. But then, you know what that shows? It shows that when the adrenaline flows, your mind works. And if you had said to me, "Can you give us talk in Spanish?" I would say, "What, are you kidding?" But at that moment, I couldn't say, "What, are you kidding?" I had no choice. And so the adrenaline flowed. And next thing I knew, I was giving this talk in Spanish. And guess what happened at the end?
What?
I had a standing ovation.
Wow.
I'll never forget that day as long as I live.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's quite impressive and
yeah.
quite a memory.
It's quite a memory. Shocking to me, but it was quite a memory. And to this day, there are people who say, "I remember when you had that talk," and yeah, I remember that too, please. So, so what questions would you like to ask?
All right. So I want to revisit something you mentioned earlier about living with your grandparents for a little bit while you were growing up.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell me more about that and more about them?
Well, my grandpa, we'll start with my grandpa, because he was the one who gave me my very, very bad habit. And you know what that bad habit is?
I do not.
I'll tell you. He's the one who turned me into a coffee addict, because I loved my grandma and my grandpa very, very much. We lived with them when we came home from the army, from Fort Knox. We lived with them for a while before we went off to the Quonset huts. And my grandpa would have his breakfast at 6 a.m. And so little Arlene wanted to be with grandpa and be just like grandpa. So at 6 a.m., grandpa sat there. He had his bowl of cereal and he had his coffee. And he gave me a bowl of cereal and a glass of milk. And I said, "I want to be just like you, Grandpa. I don't want a glass of milk. I want a cup of coffee." He said, "But you're a little girl." I said, "Yeah. All right." So he took a coffee cup and he put like of coffee in it, like, "What did you do?" And I said, "Wait a minute, did you put coffee in there?" He said, "Of course I did. Didn't I put coffee in there? Didn't you see me do it?" Okay. And the rest, of course, was milk. But little me, I was having coffee with my grandpa, and it was a very special time. Was it, whoops, just not, what happened?
Nothing, no worries, keep going.
Okay. Anyway, so the time that we spent living with my grandma and grandpa were very special and always were. And you know what else my grandpa did for me?
What?
He ensured that his love of animals was transferred to me. He got me my first puppy.
Uh-huh.
And every puppy since, because puppies unfortunately turn into dogs who get old. And when they get old, they don't live as long as human beings. And so he always made sure that I had a dog in my life.
That's sweet. All right, what about your grandmother?
So grandma was like a real balabusta. Now, of course, most people today don't even know what the word balabusta means. And it's not an Italian expression. It's not a bola. It's a real a balabusta, which means that she really knew her way around the kitchen. And she used to make wonderful meals. And 6 o'clock in the morning, after she served breakfast to grandpa and of course to me, because when we were living with them, I had to, whatever they were eating, I had to eat at 6 o'clock in the morning. But she was always cooking and always making special dishes. And she's the one who taught me to cook, taught me to love cooking. And to this day, I'll talk about, well, this was grandma's recipe. Well, that was grandma's way of doing it. Well, no, grandma didn't have a recipe. She did it but I wrote it down. And that's what I would say to her, grandma, tell me, how do you make such and such? And she would say, you take a bissel of this and you take a bissel of that, and you throw a little of this and you throw a little of that, and then you mix it up, and that's how you make it. And so that's how I learned to cook, with a little of this and a little of that. And you stir it up, and that's how you make it. And so I did develop a joy of cooking. And to this day, I was always very busy. So I used to have to do my cooking when I was working. I used to do my cooking at 4 o'clock in the morning. 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd be in the kitchen cooking and freezing, mind you, because you can't serve anything at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would cook and freeze, cook and freeze, cook and freeze. And that's what my children grew up with, cooked frozen food or frozen cooked food, whatever. So my grandma and grandpa were a very important part of my life. Unfortunately, my father's parents passed away when I was really a very little girl. You know, I remember going to their apartment and sitting there and just talking to them, but they were older and more fragile. So I didn't have the same kind of relationship. You know, it wasn't as interactive with them as it was with my mother's mother and father. So, and of course, my Auntie Molly, my mother's sister, my auntie. I never called her Aunt Molly. She was always Auntie Molly. And to this day, I call her Auntie Molly. May she live and be well till 120 years, but she's still my Auntie Molly. So what else would you like to ask me?
Going back, I know you said that your grandmother taught you how to cook. Did she teach you anything else? Like, I know you use a handful of Yiddish words in your daily vocabulary. Did you acquire those from her?
Oh,
And
you
can you talk
bet.
a little bit about that? What words you use frequently? What are maybe your favorite words? Just a little bit about Yiddish.
I don't know what words I use frequently or what are my favorite, because sometimes I shock myself when I'm in the middle of a conversation and all of a sudden a Jewish word pops out of my mouth. And you're like, wait, where'd that come from? You know, I don't remember that I remember. And then I find that I do. And so it's fun. And it's fun actually to know some words in another language. And it's fun to try. Well, yeah, I used to make my grandma laugh because I would try to have a conversation with her where I would be using the Yiddish words and she would go, ay, ay, ay. And so I used to say, you mean, ay, gefilte fish? She said, what? And that became my expression. Instead of saying oy vey, I would say oy gefilte fish. Don't ask me why. I have no clue why, but that became my expression. Oy gefilte fish. And you could ask your mother and your aunt; they'll tell you that that's what I would say. Oy gefilte fish, not oy vey. Like oy vey is like oy vey, you know. It's like the Jewish oh my, no oh my, oy vey.
Can you tell me a bit more about your grandmother, please?
My grandma, Gigi Bessie. The world knew her as Gigi Bessie. When I became pregnant with Aunt Wendy, my first child, and I told Grandma Gigi, well, at that point she was Grandma, when I told Grandma Bessie that I was pregnant, she clapped her hands together and she said, "Oh, I'm gonna bear Gigi." And I looked at her and I said, "What?" She looked at me back and she said, "Arlene, with all your education, I have to explain to you what Gigi is." And I looked at her and I said, "Yeah." She said, "Who am I to you?" I said, "My grandma." She said, "And who am I going to be to your children?" I said, "Great grandma." She says, "See, Gigi. I'll be Gigi, great grandma Bessie." Ah! Well, from that day forward, she lost any other kind of name, any other kind of identity. The world knew her as Gigi Bessie, and most often, not even Gigi Bessie. She was Gigi, to the point that a stranger assumed she was French. We had that one time that, "Oh, where in France was your grandmother from?" My grandma wasn't from France. She was from Russia. "Oh, but her name is Gigi." I said, "No, it's not Gigi. It's Gigi for great grandma." Oh, so her name was a source of comfort for all of us and humor for some of us. But that was our Gigi Bessie. And boy, did she love being a Gigi. Boy, did she love being a Gigi. So your mommy and Aunt Wendy used to say, "I think she enjoys being a great grandma more than she enjoyed being a grandma." So I said, no, she enjoyed both. She enjoyed being a grandma and she enjoyed being a great grandma. Okay, so they accepted that. And she really did enjoy it. Her greatest thrill was having grandchildren and great grandchildren. So that's my Gigi, that's my grandma.
You mentioned that she is from Russia. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and about her story?
You know, I wish I had written down a lot of the little tidbits that she mentioned along the way, but she was pretty quiet about her days in Russia. She came to the United States as a teenager. Her time in Russia was not fun. They used to come along on horses and hurt our people. They would come along on the horse with a thing and knock people down and cut them and do awful things. There was a lot of anti-Semitism. And so she and her family basically escaped and came to the United States. I don't remember exactly when, but certainly in the early, between 2010 and 2000, no, between, not 2010, between 19, I'm all right, I'm 2000, I'm going the wrong century. Between 1910 and 15, maybe? No, earlier than that. I'm not sure exactly, but they came to the United States and she was still a young woman. She was thrilled to be here. She accepted being in this country with not just open arms, but with thrilling arms from head to toe. She was so happy and so and felt so fortunate to be in this country that was so warm and accepting, even though, in truth, a lot of things going on in this country were not warm and accepting of our people, of Jewish people, or a lot of people for that matter. But it was a far cry from what they were going through in Russia, where people were really being murdered because of their religion. So she was very happy to be here in this country and very happy to become a mother and being very happy to become a grandma. And then when I announced to her that I, her oldest grandchild, was going to be a mother myself, she clapped her hands together and she said, "Oh, I'm going to be a Gigi." And I looked at her and I said, "Huh? What did you say, Grandma?" She's, "With all your education, you don't know. I'm going to be a Gigi, a great grandma." I said, "But you are a great grandma." She said, "Very funny," because great meaning good. She says, "Yes, I'm going to be hopefully a greater great grandma." I said, "You will be. Everyone who knows you loves you." And that was true. All my friends loved Grandma, later to become Gigi. All my friends loved her. All of our relatives loved her because she was a sweet lady. She was just nice. She was warm. She was accommodating. She was a great cook, a great baker, just a really good person. And I was very fortunate to have her in my life. And I wish she could have been around in my life longer. But unfortunately, she died of a broken heart. And that was when she was 98 years old. She died of a broken heart because her own child had passed away. And that was my mother. And that broke her heart. A mother should not have to bury her child, she said. And that was her downfall. But other than that, she had a great life, great history, great everything. She sewed, she cooked, she knitted, she crocheted. She was quite a lady. And everyone loved her. Everyone who knew her loved her. All my friends knew Gigi. Nobody called her Gigi Bessie or Mrs. Rauchberger or anything. Everybody called her Gigi. So to the point where strangers, if they heard us talking to her, if they heard any one of us talking to her, they assumed her name was Gigi, like the French name, Gigi, as opposed to G period, great grandma. So Gigi, a French relative. So, what other questions might you want to ask?
Continuing on kind of this a similar theme, can you talk about how her story is important to you and to our family history and kind of what it means to you and any lessons that you draw from it or things that you want me and my siblings and my cousins and our children to know?
The most important thing is to be grateful that you live in a country that accepts everybody, regardless of your race, regardless of your religion, regardless of your sexuality, regardless of anything. They accept everyone as an individual, and you're allowed to be an individual in this country. Not all countries are like that. To this day, there are countries that are very restrictive in who they allow into their country, who they allow to attain any kind of positions, who they don't, people who can't get jobs in certain countries because of their religion or because of other factors that have nothing to do with their ability to handle the job. It has to be with who they are as a person or as a religion or as a sexual identity or as a sexual affiliation or whatever. And that's not this country. This country happy to have anyone who could do the job do it. And sometimes we who are here tend to forget that. We tend to just assume and take it for granted. We should never take it for granted, because you read the newspapers, you hear the TV and radio reports, and you have to realize that a lot of countries out there are horrible places to live. Horrible places, especially if you're a Jew, to be in. But United States, it's a great place, and we are and should be forever grateful to Gigi Bessie for coming to this country and letting us follow. I mean, we didn't follow by coming into the country. We were born into the country, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So she led the way.
Wow. Yeah. Let's talk about being Jewish and Jewish identity and experience for a little bit.
Okay.
Can you tell me what being Jewish, well, first of all, can you tell me in what ways Gigi's Jewish identity was important to her and how she maintained that, especially experiencing so much anti-Semitism and pogroms in Russia, how she maintained that and celebrated that in the US, and then how she made sure that she passed it on to her children and that they passed it on to their children like you, and how have you passed it on, what does being Jewish mean to you, and how are you still involved in the Jewish community? I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, and then how you've passed that down to your children and your grandchildren.
Well, Gigi came here to this country as an older teen, and she had been in a country that was very restrictive, very hostile, and very abusive of Jews. They weren't allowed certain jobs. They weren't allowed certain educational opportunities. She came to this country as a young woman, young girl, and saw opportunity all around and was so thrilled to be an American citizen. She never forgot for one single second to be proud to be an American, to live in a country that allowed you to be yourself. You want to be a worker? Be a worker. You want to be a teacher? Be a teacher. You want to go sell stuff on the street? Go ahead, go sell stuff on the street as long as you're doing it honestly. Whatever you want, you can do. You could be whoever you want as long as you go through the right method of getting to it. You want to be a college professor? Study. Get your grades. Do your reports. Do your writings. Do what you need to do if you want to be a college professor. You want to be a doctor? Great. Be a doctor. Make sure you do the right things to learn how to be a doctor. Because if you're going to be a doctor, you better be a good one. You can't be a half-hearted doctor. You'd better be a good one if you want to be a doctor. But you better be good at whatever you decide to do. No half-hearted. There's a different body part that is usually used. Half forms of anything. Do it all. Do it wholeheartedly. Do it with enthusiasm. That was her attitude. Whatever you want to do it, but do it with enthusiasm. Don't just roll your eyes and say, yeah, all right, I'll do that. No, don't roll your eyes. Be grateful. So to Gigi, being Jewish was very important. Being allowed to be Jewish was very important because in Russia, all the Jews had to be Jews on the side. They had to sneak being Jewish. They had to have their seders in the dark so that no one would know and report them. Because if they got reported, they could be shot, they could be killed, they could be beaten up. there was a lot of anti-Semitism at that point. But in this country, you want to be Jewish? As they say in the the expressions, as they said in the old country, gay hate. You go with good health. Gay hate. You want to be Jewish? Hate, be Jewish. You don't want to be Jewish? Don't be Jewish. But if you want to, do so with pride. And she taught her children, who in turn taught their children, who in turn are teaching their children to be proud to be Jewish. There's nothing wrong with being Jewish. It's a religion. All religions, for the most part, are favorable. Most religions do not teach hatred or teach violence. Certainly not. I can't be an expert in any of the other religions. I'm not even an expert in Judaism, but I could say that in our Jewish religion, we're taught to love. We're taught to appreciate. We're taught to respect. And respect is a very important part of being Jewish. You have to respect your family. You have to respect all elders. You have to respect knowledge. You have to respect yourself. And people look at me and say, respect yourself. That's right. And that means don't do anything to tarnish your own image, your own self-respect, your own standing in the community. You don't want anybody clicking their tongue going about you. What a shame. No, you want people to say, oh, she's wonderful. Yes, she's sweet, she's kind, she's nice, she's good to people, she's good to animals. You want to be called good. You want to be appreciated. And that's what I learned from my mother. And that's what I learned from my grandmother, that it's very important to be a good person. Not to be stepped on, mind you. I'm not saying so good that you just let anyone step on you and push you around. And no, you have to have self-respect. Self-respect is very important. But you have to be going as a goal to be a good person, accomplishing things in the world that make the world a better place. When you leave the world, it should be better than when you got into it, not worse. And that's what my mother taught me, and that's what her mother, Grandma Gigi Bessie, taught her, is to try to make the world a better place by your actions, by your reactions, by your personality. Don't be someone who just takes things for granted. Work at it. Make it a better place.
Tikkun.
And that's the best advice I could give, because it's the best advice I got. So.
I love that. Thank you.
I'm sure you have other questions, and if you want, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have that I'm capable of answering. I'm certainly not a scholar in Judaism or a scholar in world history. I'm just a grandma who used to have actually a few different things that I was. I was a teacher, and I was a director of a nonprofit organization and a perpetual volunteer, still doing a lot of volunteer things. But I think that if there's any advice I can give to a young person in this world today, is to as they said in, I think it was in Hamlet, to thine own self be true. Don't do things that you don't believe in. Don't do things to satisfy someone else's wishes. Make sure that you're satisfying your goals, your wishes, and maintain your integrity above all else. There should be no one clicking their tongues about you. What a shame she does this, or what a shame she says that, or too bad she didn't do that. No tongue clicking. It should be, Oh, yeah, she's such a lovely person. Oh, she does such nice things. Oh, she's a good person. Oh, she's a good friend, a good student, a good mother, a good. That's what you should strive for, to be considered a good person. And that's my opinion. You don't have to take it. You just have to hear it for now. And that's what my grandma taught my mother, and that's what my mother taught me. And I hope that's what I taught my daughters, who in turn are teaching their daughters to be good people and to enjoy life and to not hurt anybody intentionally. Do not intentionally hurt somebody. That's the thing. Sometimes you hurt someone without realizing it. You could say something that just flies out of your mouth that you didn't even mean the way it sounded. And next thing you know, someone is upset and you think, why are they upset? What did I say? What did I do? Because sometimes we say things that we don't really realize how they sound. But always apologize when that happens, because that makes you a better person. We're not perfect. We're human beings. We're not perfect. Accept the fact that we're not perfect. But accept the fact that you need to say, I'm sorry, when you have to say, I'm sorry. And thank you when that's appropriate too. I have to say, that is definitely one thing that gets my goat, is that when people just accept things as if everything's coming to them and they don't appreciate, and they don't say thank you to God or thank you to someone who's given them a gift. How many times have you given someone a gift and they don't even say thank you? You don't say thank you. What kind of mother did you have? But at any rate, and I'm also a sit-down comedian. Not a stand-up comedian, sit-down comedian. Anyhow, what other questions might you want to ask me?
Based on everything you've discussed leading up to currently in your life, can you discuss what kind of things you're still involved with? I know you said you have quite a handful.
Well, I wish I had more time to do more things, but I know that I'm some of the things I've actually decreased in terms of my involvement. For example, I was the chairperson of our synagogue's book club. I'm now a member of the book club, but I'm no longer the chairman because I did a lot of stuff in being the chairman, a lot of research and a lot of interactions with people and with authors. And so I'm still involved, but not as chair. And I do a lot of things where I'm involved in a number of different committees. And I try to make decisions that help, not hurt other people. I'm involved in my synagogue. I'm involved with the sisterhood. And in the Bronx, I try to help with the Bronx Jewish Community Council, because at this point, there are a lot of old senior citizens in the Bronx who need help. And so we try to raise some funds to get them some support services and get people to come in and help them and bring food to those who are hungry. And that's something that I hope I could pass on to everybody. The satisfaction you get knowing that you're making a difference. You're not just waking up, having 24 hours go by, going to sleep, waking up, going another 24 hours, waking up, going another. It's not just living through another day. It's making every day count. And you don't have to make yourself crazy. You don't have to be thinking that every minute I got to be doing something special. I got to be doing to help. And no, you don't. But don't waste a day either. Don't make a day pass without at least smiling at one person. You know, a simple, like your smile. A simple smile sometimes makes a difference in someone's life. There are times where I pass someone on the street and I don't even know them. I don't take them home with me, but I'll smile at them and say, good morning, good afternoon, or hi there, have a good day. And I walk on. Now they might say to themselves, who's that? Not who's she? I don't even know when she said good morning to me. That's their problem. That's not my problem. My problem is I was being a nice person and I said good morning or good afternoon or whatever. That's not my problem if they don't accept it. So, as I said, it takes nothing to say good morning or good afternoon or good evening to someone as you pass them on the street. That's a silly little thing, but it's a true thing. And I know that when someone passes me and says, hello, good morning, or have a good day, or isn't it a nice day today? And I say, yeah, it is. I know that makes me feel good when someone else does that to me. So I do that back to other people. And that's something I learned from my mother and my grandmother too. To be kind to other people whenever you can, but not to be stepped on. There's difference to being kind versus being stepped on. Don't let anyone take advantage of you. You know, in Shakespeare, there was the expression, to thine own self be true. Be true to yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to revisit something we discussed earlier. We talked about Gigi's story from coming to the United States from Russia. Do you know of any other family members who came from or immigrated to the United States, and maybe who they were, where they came from, and what they did here?
Well, really, almost all of that generation, my your great grandma's generation, mostly all came from Russia and Poland. And they came to the United States. And when they got here, they really didn't know a whole lot of English, but boy, did they learn fast. And they made sure that their children went to school, and they pressured them to make sure that they did their work and they studied. And they then sat with the parents and taught the parents so that they learned English. And that there was no saying, I don't speak English or in whatever language. They didn't say, yo no hablo inglés. There was none of that. It was, they learned the language, whether they spoke in the house. Yes, my grandmother and my grandfather and my mother would speak to each other in Yiddish because it was easier. And it wasn't because they were trying to hide anything from us. It was that it was easier. That was the native language. But outside, English only, because they were Americans. They were Americans now, and English is the language of America. But in the house, yes, they spoke Yiddish. Not always. They sometimes spoke, especially if I was around, my cousins, they spoke English.
Um, Can you tell me a little bit about Ruben and Rose Mtis?
Rose and Rufke, as he was called. Ruben was called Rufke. That's actually Grandpa's side of the family. That's Grandma Charlotte's. Grandpa Barry's mother was Grandma Charlotte. Grandma Charlotte's first cousin was Rose Mtis. Her family founded the ice cream. They were the ice cream people, Mtis Ice Cream. And she married Ruben Mtis, and they raised their children here in this country, and they were very successful. And Rufke, as he was called, Ruben, used to love when we would come to visit because we were his tasters. And we would arrive at they lived in a beautiful apartment in Jersey. And we would arrive and he would say, just in time. And he would have spread out these different bowls of ice cream. I want you to taste them, tell me which one you like best, which one you like least, and what we should name them. And because he was always coming up with new flavors. And I used to, because I was an ice creamaholic. So we used to love to go to Rose and Rufki's house, apartment, and test ice creams. And that was a lot of fun.
And all your hard work paid off. Now it's Haagen-Dazs.
Yeah, now and then they sold it to Haagen-Dazs. Yeah, our hard work, right? The tasters, it was hard work. Let me tell you, tasting all that ice cream. Now, but Haagen-Dazs bought them out, and when Haagen-Dazs did, there was an agreement that they stayed on as advisors for a period of time. So it was very nice, very nice. So, no. You know, the whole thing, I think, with generation to generation is to appreciate what came before, to anticipate and appreciate what comes after, and to have goals and not just, it's another day. Every day should have meaning. A day without meaning it's a day not worth having. And I'm not saying that you have to work like a crazy person to make every day, filled with 100 activities or 100 things that you've done or accomplishments of, yes, I did this, I did this, I did this. No, but even just passing someone on the street and saying good morning or good afternoon or good evening, you have no idea what that could mean to a person who's living alone, who has no one in their lives to make them feel good. So by just saying, hi, good morning, and pass on, or have a great day. Wow, what a smile that person just gave me. People underestimate their own powers. We human beings have tremendous power. We really do. We could make someone feel good so easily just by saying good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, or good day, or how are you today, or hi. So we should hopefully pass that on to the next generation. And someday you may be a mommy, and I hope that you pass that on to your children, that they should say a simple good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm not saying God, take the person home with you. Just be nice. Don't ignore people. I see a lot of people ignore. You could be in a crowded room and not say hello to one single person. Why? Is it going to hurt you to make a comment? Like you're at a meeting and you happen to notice a painting on the wall, just for example. And you say to the person next, isn't that a nice painting? Well, you don't know them from Adam, but you could say, isn't that a nice, it's a conversation starter. Isn't that a nice picture? Yeah, that is a nice picture. What do you think they meant by that? I don't know. Me neither, but it's a nice picture. You start a conversation with a stranger. Careful where you are when you start that conversation. But it makes someone's life better for the moment. Or you see somebody who looks like they're a little down and out, a little sad. You're at a meeting and someone's sitting there, and they're looking. We'll go with them and say, hi, how you doing? I'm not saying take them home. I'm not saying to give them your name, rank, and serial number, just a simple hello. It does so much. And that's my attitude. And you can call me whatever you want to call me. That's what I do. And sometimes people say, you say hello to everybody. No, I don't say hello to everybody, but I do say hello to a lot of people. Just because it doesn't, so as they say, no skin off my back. Just to pass somebody and say, good morning, or good afternoon. Nice day, isn't it? Yeah, it is. I've had like that. But yeah, it is. Like they're looking at me like, what am I going to take out a gun and kill them because I said it's a nice day? There are people who are very cautious before they return a hello. Hello is not going to kill you. Now, going with someone someplace and you don't know them, that might kill you. But saying hello back is not going to kill you. Growing up, we always knew we were Jewish, but we weren't overly, I use the term loosely, observant. And as I got older and had a greater variety of friends, some of whom were not Jewish at all, and some of whom were much more Jewish than us in terms of observance, and some who were observant in a different religion. Having that kind of experience, because I grew up in a very multi-racial, multinational, multi-religious community. It was a very interesting period of time to be growing up. We all appreciated it. The more I think about it, the more I realize it was a very good period because we all appreciated each other's religions. And I remember the Ryan family. Mrs. Ryan she wasn't Jewish, but she was a balabusta, let me tell you. Mrs. Ryan used to have all the neighborhood kids come to her house to celebrate all of the holidays. They were at Mrs. Ryan's house. So you came to her house for Hanukkah. You came to her house for St. Patrick's Day. You came to her house for Christmas. You came to her house for Mother's Day, Father's Day, Earth Day, Aunt Day, Uncle Day, this day, that. Because Mrs. Ryan loved having her house filled with kids. And so this kid, along with my other kid friends, used to go to Mrs. Ryan's house for all the holidays. And in addition to her house, many of the community, you can't say homeowners because they weren't homeowners. We lived in the Quonset huts. They put up these houses for veterans, these like long structures with an entrance at one end and an entrance at the other end, and a wall, an internal wall between, which separated this house and that house. So like back-to-back houses. They were really apartments, but on ground level. And that's where we, family of veterans, lived. So picture this is the whole building. And on one street, you entered from here. On the other street, you entered from here, but they were both attached. But with a wall in between, so that this family and this family were in two different apartments, but in a two-family structure, if that makes any sense. So there was a street running here and a street running here. And so for a period of time, we lived in one of these Quonset huts. And I, as a child, had the time of my life because we celebrated every single holiday. Whether it was a Jewish holiday, an Italian holiday, an Irish holiday, a Catholic holiday, Muslim, whatever the holiday was, we all celebrated each other's holidays. And that gave me a really good foundation of appreciation for other people and their ways of living and doing things. And Mrs. Ryan, I'll never forget Mrs. Ryan because she was very much the Catholic Mrs. Ryan. but she was also the one who promoted everyone else's religion. So I remember that, and I remember feeling that was special. But that was when we lived in the Quonset huts. And I have to say that, and that was post-World War II, that experience really gave me, I guess, the foundation of respect for all religions. And it also, to this day, makes me wonder why everybody can't just accept each other and get along and appreciate each other. Because that was wonderful that my family would have people over to help light Hanukkah candles. And Mrs. Ryan had a special time for the kids to come over and trim her Christmas tree. All the kids, Jewish, non-Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, it didn't matter. She had a Christmas tree, and we were there to help her trim the Christmas tree. The same way they came during 8 nights of Hanukkah to my house to light candles with us. And to this day, I wonder if we're not missing something by not having that kind of appreciation for one another's religions. You don't have to be Catholic to go celebrate with someone at their Christmas tree. You don't have to be Jewish to come to someone's house who's lighting a Hanukkah candle. You just have to want to appreciate what someone else is doing and let them do it, because it's their right to celebrate their holiday at their time. And you should be willing to celebrate with them. Not that you are celebrating the holiday, but you're celebrating them. That's my take from my childhood of holiday celebrations.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, no, I wonder why we can't still be doing that. You know, it's like I've heard people say, well, I don't celebrate that, I'm not Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish to commemorate Hanukkah. The same way you don't have to be Catholic to go to someone's house and admire their Christmas tree. What's the difference? We're all people. And I think some people kind of lose that a little bit. That's one of the things that, if you ask me what bothers me, that's one of the things that bothers me, that there isn't as much appreciation for one another as there should be. We don't all have dark hair. We don't all have blonde hair. We don't all have curly hair. We don't all have straight hair. Now, those of us who have straight hair, of course, wish we had curly hair, but that's another story altogether. But we're different. We're all different people. We look different. We act different. We eat different. Even within the same religions, we eat differently. And that's not necessarily due to religion. It's due to taste. But I don't know. I'm just, sometimes I get into my worldly philosopher mode. And I think, why can't everybody just enjoy each other? Regardless of what you're wearing, what you're using, what you're doing, what you're smelling, what you're eating. We're all people. I don't know.
We are.
And I love to be able to celebrate someone else's holiday with them. And I love to have someone celebrate my holiday with me. And I hope that feeling has been transferred through the genes to my grandchildren, because I think it is important to appreciate what you have and to appreciate what someone else has. And I remember one time I was a little kid, and I said to my mother, why can't we have a Christmas tree? She said, because that gives us the opportunity to go to Mrs. Ryan's house and admire her Christmas tree and make her feel good about it. The same way her children come to our house and admire our Hanukkah and say, aren't those candles beautiful? We are able to give someone else the privilege and the joy of seeing different holidays. And that's true. So, your grandmother, the worldly philosopher.
It's pretty good philosophy.
Well, it's, what they say, you learn what you live. My mother was not a college educated person. She was a high school grad, but she had a lot of smarts for someone who wasn't educated. And my grandmother, forget it. My grandmother, I don't even think had a full high school because she came here from Russia in the early 2000s, 1900s, or am I saying 2000s, the 1900s. And my grandmother was one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. Well, you won't meet her, but she's one of the smartest people I ever knew because she just had this way about her. She accepted everyone. She had, back in the day, now remember, I'm not talking about current times. She had Black friends. She had Spanish friends. She had Jewish friends. She was friends with the superintendent of the next building. I mean, my grandma was a very warm and accepting person. And it didn't matter what race, religion, nothing mattered to her as long as you're a good person. And she would always say to me, Arlene, as long as you're a good person, I'm happy. And that's how I feel too. You're a good person. I want to know you.
Well, that was a very nice note. I think we could wrap up on that. It's a very powerful and meaningful sentiment. So just before we finish, is there anything else that you want to talk about or to share or that you want to be included in this?
Yes, absolutely. To say how much I love you and how proud I am of you. With that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.